Merlin. If you were wondering why last month I was doing all that Monty Python and the Holy Grail stuff during my Babylon 5 review, well, now you know. I just wanted to get it out of my system, because otherwise that would just take over these two movies. The story for this was conceived by Edward Kamara, author of Enemy Mine and Lady Hawk, although obviously this was drawn from the legends around the mythical character. Lots of tales have been told about Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table, but to focus on Merlin and place him at the center was very much less common at this time. Generally, Merlin was sword in the stone when he did show up. He was old and wise, sometimes a bit scatterbrained, sometimes a bit eccentric perhaps, but that's generally where the character went. The miniseries takes a different approach to it, for even though it starts with an old Merlin telling the story, for the most part, he's not the Merlin that you're used to seeing. Now, placing this in context is important. This was made in 1998, 3 years before the Lord of the Rings trilogy would begin to hit theaters. So Gandalf wasn't in the public zeitgeist, and Harry Potter and friends hadn't even reached the US in novel form yet. The technology for CGI was still developing, although practical effects are prominent because of Jim Henson Productions being involved. They and Hallmark Entertainment had done Gulliver's Travels in 1996, and then Henson's company did the special effects for Hallmark's The Odyssey in 1997, and then here in 1998. Now, while Hallmark was responsible for the 10th Kingdom that we've previously looked at, Jim Henson Productions was not involved in that, just in case you were curious. Before we delve in, one strange matter that I have to address. Numerous sources list this miniseries as being 3 parts long. Even Amazon Prime has this divided into 3 one-hour chapters. I think, however, we're watching it as it is originally intended to be seen in 2 parts, seeing as how the miniseries originally aired over 2 nights and not 3. Plus, the break is much more dramatic at the halfway point of the miniseries. So these movie-length versions are what I'm going to go with, and with that, we're going to jump right into episode 1 of Merlin. After Old Man Merlin takes a moment to introduce us to the story, we jump straight into war. This is being fought for no other reason than to dethrone the king. And I can't imagine why anyone would want to overthrow him.
Let the whole world die! If I die...
Knowing that his rule was coming to an end, this prick had all of the prisoners slaughtered purely out of spite. So when Merlin narrates that the crown passed to someone even worse, that's saying something. That's beating Usain Bolt to the last bagel kind of achievement. In the chaos that followed, the Saxons arrived and said, "Hey, there's some shit here that isn't smashed yet. Let's hop to it, lads." They desecrated the Christian churches and the Celtic pagan sites, and so Queen Mab arrived in response to the threat and summons her sister, the Lady of the Lake. Oh, you just have to show off, don't you? Mab's called this meeting so that she can share her plan. Create a wizard to serve as a leader to bring the people back to the old ways. Meaning them. LOTL, as all the young hip kids call her today, says that they have to accept that things move on. But Mab doesn't want to fade away and die. So, she returns to her servant, Frick.
You heard that, Frick?
Yes, well, I'm afraid, madam, that your sister is rather, shall we say, indecisive when it comes to making decisions.
With him on the case, everything's going to be as smooth as a finely aged scotch.
He's magnificent. Now, I have to give him life.
Oh, shit.
In Celtic lore, Mab was the queen of the fairies, hence Shakespeare mentioning her in Romeo and Juliet. Her role as queen of the fairies would later be taken over by Titania in mythology. According to some legends, Merlin was the son of a devil, but because the impetus for this miniseries is to battle the coming change that's being represented by the arrival of Christianity, it's not a Christian devil, so Mab is repurposed for the role. as well as turn into the dark counterpart of the Lady of the Lake. The mother dies in childbirth, and the midwife, Ambrosia, is going to raise him, at the request of the mother, although Mab seems to think that she can do a better job with her pixies. I know they're probably supposed to be fairies, but frankly, I always pictured fairies as being not quite so stooge-like. When we next catch up with Merlin, he's a teenager sleeping in the rotted-out base of a tree. Nothing surprising there, except for the fact that he doesn't have a joint. He suddenly realizes that he's not alone. The Lady Nimue and her entourage are nearby and asking for directions. He gives them, and when asked how he'd like to be rewarded for this service, he asks for a kiss. On the hand. It's not like he's going to ram his tongue down her throat. Oh, spoke too soon. Well, despite asking for directions, she wandered off the path anyway and wound up in some kind of bog. So he comes running to answer her screams for help. He holds out his wood and commanded that it grow so that she can take hold of the end of it. Ahem. And sure enough, this worked.
It is a very special wood. It does lots of things our special wood does.
So with her life saved, she rewards him with another kiss, and Merlin is absolutely giddy over this, certain that she's his one true love, and telling Ambrosia all about it. With the news of what happened, she knows that now is the time that Merlin is meant to go to Mab.
No. Keep your chin up. Magic has no power over the human heart.
Good to know. I'd hate that someone could use magic to make someone fall madly in love with them. Glad we've dodged that bullet. A magical horse arrives to take him to her, while mystical creatures follow, and soon...
Sorry I'm late. Ship left without me. Dreadfully rude, really.
It's Frick, come to lead the way through the tunnel full of pixies, until they finally arrive at...
Follow me. Don't get lost.
I'm not sure which is more shocking, that they would actually do this in 1998, or that they thought the hilarity of the gag would be worth it. Never thought Martin Short would give us a character more cringe-inducing than Ed Grimley, but there it is. After the introductions are done, she explains the plan. She's going to teach Merlin to be the most powerful wizard, to then lead the mortals back to her and the other members of the old Celtic mythos.
What if I don't want to be a wizard?
What? That's like saying, what if I don't want to be able to fly? Who wouldn't want to have magical powers? I mean, I love my job, but I'd quit tomorrow if I found out I could be a wizard instead. And this isn't like some other kinds of magic either. You can do magic and still have a little recreational activity on the side, if you know what I mean. They show off a little of what can be done.
But we can't change form.
Oh, perfect for anyone who's ever wanted to have sex with a pack of playing cards. Old Merlin also appears, advising him that no matter how old he gets, to stay young on the inside. I'm assuming that means lots of antioxidants. Frick explains how this magic thing works. There are 3 levels of magic. The first is using words, the second is using gestures, the third is using pure thought. Having to speak backwards and wear fishnets, that's limited solely to Zatanna. Merlin learns it pretty well, but Frick explains to Mab that Merlin is always going to be limited to hand magic.
He doesn't want to do it. In his heart, he doesn't like magic.
He doesn't like it.
Hermie doesn't like to make toys. Shame on you. While she vents her frustrations at Frick, Merlin gets a visit from the Lady of the Lake when she appears in an image of ice. Guess the judges are going to allow it. She says she doesn't approve of what Mab's doing, like creating him, or letting his mother die in childbirth.
She let my mother die.
Oh dear, I shouldn't have told you, but it just slipped out.
Yeah, right, it slipped out, just as innocently as the Johnson of a creepy guy standing on the subway. When she tells him that Ambrosia is ill, he's firmly committed to going home now, and she helps him to get there. Lady of the Lake does have its perks. So Mab rushes over to Ambrosia, who's just trying to deal with this dying thing. I mean, she's sick and she lives in a stick hut. It's a wonder that she's made it this long without getting pneumonia. Ambrosia has no interest in helping Mab get her hooks into Merlin. Cleanliness may be next to godliness, but apparently fairies don't give a shit. Merlin arrives just in time to be with Ambrosia when she dies, and he is incensed.
You killed her.
No, I didn't.
You killed her like you killed my real mother.
No, I only let her die.
That's less convincing than you might think. Mab's problem is she's so used to always getting her way that she doesn't grasp the need to be persuasive. She thinks Merlin can be ordered or bullied like she orders and bullies Frick. But Merlin's not going to stand for it. He may not be as strong as her, but he won't help her. Instead, he swears a blood oath on Ambrosia's grave that he won't use his magic except to defeat Mab, and possibly at kids' birthday parties. The mortgage on that stick hovel is due. Years later, the king who killed the crazy old one, Vortigern, is trying to build a castle on the edge of a cliff, because Uther is gathering an army to seize the throne and avenge his father's death. We'll need a good, strong castle to defend ourselves from that. And if anyone spots a good, strong castle, please let us know. We're in the market for one. After dragging off the architect, Vortigern turns on the soothsayer and demands to know why this keeps happening. Apparently this isn't the first time he's had a castle fall over. A statement that has not been said terribly often, like, this isn't the first time he's crashed a hot air balloon into a bowling alley. The soothsayer goes to some standing stones and gets a surprise visit from Mab, explaining that the land is cursed. That's why you always call before digging.
You must find a man who has no mortal father and mix his blood with the mortar.
A lot of the material here is drawn directly from the writings of Geoffrey of Monmouth in the 12th century. The only difference here being that it was the elders who said this instead of Mab. And it was just an excuse at the time to kill Merlin. In the show, Merlin gets picked up, and the soothsayer explains a little on the road that their king is not what you'd call an understanding man. Not that much prefacing is required. Vortigern wants to make with the blood mortar, but the soothsayer thinks that Merlin's wizarding might be more useful. Vortigern isn't convinced, and Merlin points out that he's acting rather stupid, much to the king's shock that anyone would dare to call him that just because he's acting like an idiot. Why, I ought to kill him, unlike my current plan, which is to kill him. And he thinks I'm stupid. But Merlin uses his magic to show the water running underneath in a cavern, which is creating instability that is causing the collapse, not some curse. He also has a vision of two dragons, red and white, the crests of Vortigern and another. You're welcome.
They think before they act. I act before I think.
Yep. If I had to guess, I'd say the Latin motto under the crest is Metimer simel bis interficium. Measure once, cut twice. The king does the kindest thing that he possibly can to the soothsayer and architect. He fires them. At least they get a chance to run away. Merlin, on the other hand, has been hired, and thus is dragged off to the castle, the one that hasn't fallen down yet, so that the king can toss him into a cell. The king is getting ready to face Uther, who has arrived with an army. Waiting in his cell is Frick, who explains that, look, oaths are great and all, but you're kind of screwed here, and Mab is a nasty piece of work. Why piss her off?
She's a terrible enemy, Master Merlin, and a very poor employer.
There was this one time when I was singing Mammy in blackface, and... The one good bit of news is that Nimue is here. She was taken hostage to ensure her father's loyalty. She goes to Vortigern to explain that Merlin can't live locked inside tiny stone walls, and if he dies, his knowledge of the future will die with him, knowledge that may reveal a secret of how to win. So Vortigern has Merlin brought in.
I need your help. How are you? I know I've been a little hot-tempered. Patience is not one of my virtues.
Now, you have so few of those, I wouldn't concern myself about that one too much, sire.
He's definitely inherited Mab's sense of diplomacy. Vortigern allows him outside, where Nimue tells Merlin about Avalon and the Holy Grail and its disappearance from the island. He, in turn, shows off his illusion abilities, as in tricks, so he's technically not doing magic. And speaking of not doing magic despite Mab comes the next day. She wants Merlin, and in return, she'll tell Vortigern how to win. But it's not a pleasant answer.
Sacrifice Nimue to the great dragon.
I don't want to be too much of a skeptic, but it's hard to see how that's gonna help. Vortigern is hesitant, but only because he doesn't want to throw away a hostage. But once Frick arrives disguised as a guard and saying that her father's already switched sides, well, that's that sorted. Vortigern will feed her to the dragon even if Mab didn't suggest it now. That's just the kind of guy he is. At Mab's insistence, Merlin is tied to a tree so he's forced to watch, because she knows that he won't keep his oath if it means letting Nimue die. Ugh, there's a special effect that aged like a hard-partying former child actor. Dragon Eyes work like the Terminator. Merlin tries not to use magic, but in the end, it's the only way, allowing him to use water and vines to pin the dragon, but not before the fires burn her. She's alive, but scarred by the experience. So Merlin brings her to Avalon in the hopes that they can be healed. While the nuns treat her, Merlin steps out to give Mab the business, making clear that he's going to make her pay for this one. So after saying his goodbye to Nimue, he heads out to talk to the Lady of the Lake, hoping for some kind of help. And sure enough, she gives him Excalibur. Bit of a cross-class kerfuffle giving a wizard a sword, but I guess the Celtics just don't bother with that sort of thing. Merlin heads off to see Uther next, where his greeting is less than hospitable, although it's just a bit of mockery instead of a punch in the face or a toss in a cell. Merlin says that Vortigern is going to attack now rather than waiting until spring, as is normally the case. He's a stinking cheater. Uther is kind of suspicious, but Merlin says that since Vortigern is allied with Mab, it stands to reason that Merlin should then ally with Vortigern's enemy. If he's not an asshole, of course. Merlin advises Uther to fight on the frozen river. It's the perfect spot. That way, if the battle goes bad, we can turn this into a hockey game. Mab shows up to pass along that Merlin is helping Uther, but she's frustrated by the fact that her ally is too stupid to realize the problem. So she gives him a tear that is turned into a crystal, and I guess that must be a sign to go start the battle.
Charge!
Yep, just another day at the office for him. Incidentally, having my scholarly background, you shouldn't be surprised that I instantly recognized this guy's name from an episode of Doctor Who. The episode was Battlefield, of course, because that has to do with the whole King Arthur thing. So I made a note, Vortigern, having watched that episode so many times over the years, including for this show. But then I heard them in this movie refer to the guy as Vortigern. Huh. Well, maybe that's the correct one. I made a pronunciation note on that. But then I watched it further and I heard Vortigern. What? Am I going nuts? So I went back to Doctor Who and clearly, they said Vortigern. So I changed the pronunciation note to Vortigern. Then I watched some more, and in Merlin they were obviously saying Vortigern. And then a little more into it, and it was very clearly Vortigern. Then I watched the clip from Battlefield that I had just watched, and I swear they changed it because now it's Vortigern. There's no possible way to hear an R in there at all. Oh, I don't know. Is that snooty doctor right? Have I finally had that stroke? I don't know. And more to the point, I don't care anymore. He can be Captain Dipshit as far as I'm concerned. So they fight, and they fight, and they fight, and they fight. And finally, Vortigern deigns to come down and actually join in the battle that he started. But Mab's crystal must be doing something because despite being mobbed and stabbed, he's unharmed. But he doesn't know that Merlin has Excalibur, slicing Vortigern's blade in two and then causing him to fall under the ice and die.
That is a mighty sword. It is Excalibur. It can only be used by a good man in a good cause.
Let me know if you see one. So he gives Uther Excalibur and heads off to be with Nimue, assuming that good King Uther will be an ally that he can call on against Mab. Instead, when all the lords are presenting themselves to their new king, Uther takes a shine to Lady Igraine, wife of Lord Cornwall. Oh, and also the parents of Morgan Le Fay. She's going to be kind of important. As established, magic has no power over the human heart, so this is all Uther's own doing, but Mab sees an opportunity here. I mean, she doesn't have to do much, just gesture around the lady, and that's pretty much all Uther needs to really seal the deal in his mind. Merlin tries to make him see reason, but is distracted by Morgan, who's interested in magic. Real magic, none of this sleight of hand crap. If David Copperfield can do it, I'm not interested. After the party, Uther joins Merlin in a ride through the countryside, where Merlin starts to see that this king thinks with his pecker. He asks Merlin to find a way to make her his, but Merlin says that he can't change her heart, and he won't kill her husband, and he isn't going to encourage this idiocy. Uther is prepared to go to war to take her, so Merlin gets the king to hand over Excalibur, thinking that he's going to get some kind of Spanish fly put on there or something. Instead, Merlin walks over to a rocky outcropping and plunges the sword into it, awakening the rock giant, who takes this stabbing rather well. Merlin explains that he wants to keep the sword safely here until a good man can come to claim it, and it's not like the giant has anything better to do. So Merlin is now free to head back to Avalon.
Journey's end, Sir Rupert.
I certainly hope so.
Did you have to go back for seconds at the banquet? Your ass is going to be bigger than mine.
I'm not ready for you to see me.
Let me be the judge of that.
Oof, sorry, I came looking for Nimue, not Harvey Dent. Can you point me to her? Merlin can see her scars bother her and tries to heal them, but Mab is stopping him. So it's time to get back down to the business of defeating her. Nimue won't leave Avalon like this, so vanquishing his enemy is the only thing left that he can do. Plus, you got to keep busy when you're a wizard, otherwise you wind up building a tower out of boredom. Meanwhile, Uther has been sieging Lord Cornwall's castle for 3 months now, and his advisors are trying to get him to see reason. The kingdom is falling apart, and we can't emphasize this point enough, Your Majesty, because you want to fuck another man's wife. That's not really a sign of leadership. Merlin arrives, knowing that the king is beyond reason. If the death of hundreds isn't enough to make him realize he's being a dick here, well then Merlin's rebukes certainly aren't going to cut it. Since nothing short of regicide is going to end this, Merlin says he will bring an end to this madness on the condition that the child that he has foreseen to be born of this union be tutored by him.
What will you do with him?
Teaching him honor and goodness.
I can do that.
Honor and goodness, the words stick in your throat. You choke on them just as you'll choke on your vomit in the end.
Merlin, are you mad at me? Merlin also wants him to leave her husband be, and Uther's like, yeah, sure, whatever it takes to tap that ass. So Uther breaks camp, and as expected, Cornwall follows, allowing the plan to go forward.
Only we have until the morning. The night is your friend. Use it.
Yeah, there's no way this doesn't look bad. The Merlin in the story seems to regret it as one awful deception in order to try to bring peace, since modern sentiments would see this deception as a form of rape, even though this is derived from the mythology. This deception leads to the conception of none other than the legendary King Arthur, at least according to the writings of Geoffrey. There's a strong probability that the inspiration for this came from Greek mythology. Alcmene was approached by Zeus in disguise as her husband. He then came by later on, and he also slept with his wife, leading to her conceiving fraternal twins, one from her husband and one from Zeus, the latter being the famous hero Heracles, or more commonly known through the Roman name Hercules. Being a famous myth, it's possible Geoffrey drew upon this inspiration for Arthur's own conception, since it reflected a compliment to Merlin's own as the supposed son of the devil, yet became a doer of great deeds. Arthur would be a great king, even though he was conceived by a deceiving murderer. And of course, Uther killed her husband anyway out of petty spite. While Merlin laments that his betrayal of Igraine now led to this betrayal, Mab is sulking, so she sends Frick to go make some trouble, going to see Morgan, whose keen magic abilities had allowed her to see Uther as he really was, and thus knows that the baby being born in the other room is not really her brother. Frick turns himself into a dancing swashbuckler, impressing her with actual magic rather than trickery. He promises to teach her real magic too, so long as she places a stone in Arthur's crib. That'll teach that little punk. Outside on the rocks, Merlin is relieved at the birth of Arthur, a good man to become a good king, but Mab comes along to spoil the moment, and so the two argue on the cliffs about this proxy war being fought with Arthur's fate determining who will win, Mab or the wizard. In 3 weeks, we'll find out how this ends when we return for Merlin Part 2.
All hail your lord! All hail